Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I'm talking about the classics that I plan to read in 2022. I am back filming in the library, but the kittens are out, so if you hear thumping noises, like you probably just did, they're running around and playing because that's what they do. So hopefully I won't have kittens climbing all over me while I'm trying to film this video, but we'll see. You've been warned. So I really debated what I wanted to choose for this list. Originally, I wanted to do 12 classics because that's one a month, and that's what I did last year. And that was very doable. I actually think I ended up reading, I think, over 40 classics last year. I'm including children's classics in that as well. Then I was trying to choose my list and it was impossible to narrow it down to 12. So I was like, well, maybe I should do 22 classics in 2022. But I ended up not doing that because I don't want to overwhelm myself. I mentioned in my 2022 reading goals video that my reading has really slowed down because my life has gotten a lot fuller and busier since we moved to Kentucky, and it's all wonderful things. But I don't want to be stressing myself out with my reading and my reading goals. Reading is like my primary hobby, and I do it for fun, for joy, to relieve stress. So I don't want to make it more stressful on myself. And I could have definitely done 22 books and had breathing room for sure, but I wanted to leave myself open because, you know, last year proved to me that there's so many times throughout the year where it comes out that friends of mine are reading a book that I had wanted to read for a while, and so I want to give myself like breathing room to be able to include buddy reads and stuff. So I decided, okay, I'm gonna do the 12 and I'm gonna choose it if it kills me. However, unfortunately, it apparently almost killed me. I'm going with 13 books. I'm going rogue, you know? So lucky number 13, this is what we're doing. I just couldn't narrow it down between two books, between two authors, and finally was just like, you know what? Who says it has to be 12? We're doing 13. So these are the 13 classics that I am prioritizing in 2022. I'm certain that I will read others. In fact, I have a couple videos coming up talking about other TBRs and ways to reduce my physical TBR, and there are some classics on that list that I've had on my shelf for a while. So there are other classics that I will read this year for sure, but these are the ones that I'm prioritizing, and quite a few of them are beasts. So here we go. Book number one that I am prioritizing this year is a behemoth. I have decided, I started this last year, I think, that there are certain tomes, or some people call them mammoths, that were really intimidating to me, but I still want to read them. And so I decided I am going to choose one of these a year to focus on, and that makes it more doable. So last year's was Les Mis. I read it over the course of the summer. If you've been here for a while, you probably remember my endless vlogs of me talking about Les Mis. So this year's tome is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I have read a couple Tolstoys. I have read Anna Karenina, and then I have also read The Death of Ivan Ilyich, which is a novella. It's short, it's easy to read. War and Peace has been on my list for a very long time. I have tried to start reading this book twice. The last time that I started it, I got all the way through book one and started book two, and it was just very much all about war, and I was just kind of like, oh, I don't care, and just kind of stopped reading it. So this is a year that I will conquer War and Peace. I'm gonna do it. It's gonna happen. And I am buddy reading this with Stephanie from Miss Richards Reads. We're starting this in January, I think. So I know a lot of people are planning to read this book, so if any of you like want to jump in to have someone to chat with about it, to help keep you accountable, let me know, because the more the merrier when it comes to reading a book like this, because I know it slogs in parts. So I think it's really going to help me to have some accountability to keep going and to push through. The next few books on here are Victorian books. It's really funny because I posted on Instagram, like, how many Victorian books is too many Victorian books? Asking for a friend. And clearly I found my people, because so many people replied and were like, there's no such thing as too many Victorian novels. So I have quite a few Victorian novels on this list. 4 out of the 13 books are Victorian books. It's fine, it's great. I love Victorian books. Victorian and Russian are my favorites. So there's quite a few of both on here. I have a couple of like really pretty books on here, so I'm kind of excited to hold them up. This one I just bought earlier this year, I think in the fall, maybe. It's so pretty. Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. I don't know anything about this book at all. Not one thing. I know the main character, I think her name's Becky, but there's no description, so I don't know. I have seen this book and this protagonist referenced in a lot of books, so I feel like I need to read it because I just don't get the references. So yeah, so I want to read this one. It does look to be quite a large book. Looks like close to 700 pages. So yeah, this is a big one. Not as big as War and Peace, but it's a big one. So, but I really do want to read this. I've never read anything by Thackeray. I don't know, maybe he wrote other books. This is the only one I've really heard people talk about though. The next pretty Victorian book on here is a Dickens. I have been, for the past few years, reading 2 Dickens every year and making one of them a new book and one of them a reread. So on this list of classics, I only have the new one. I think I already know what my reread is going to be, and I think it's going to be a buddy read with somebody, but I'm not putting that on this list because I have to limit myself somewhere, right? So anyways, I have read a lot of Dickens novels and I am a very big fan of Dickens, and I feel like a fake fan when I tell people that I have never read A Tale of Two Cities. I tried to start it multiple times in my teenage years and young adult years, just couldn't get into it, was super bored with it. So I put it down like seriously like a couple of chapters in. I've never gotten very far in it. So I want to read it this year because I feel like it's such an iconic Dickens. It's a favorite for a lot of people and it follows like the French Revolution. I'm pretty sure the 2 cities are London and Paris. And I really enjoyed the French Revolution aspect to Les Mis. So I think I'll really enjoy this more knowing a little bit more context about that time period. This one isn't too huge. I read Bleak House last year and that one was really big. I think that one was around 1,000 pages. And this one's like around 400, I think, in this particular edition. So that makes it a little less intimidating. The next Victorian classic that I have on this list is The Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy. I have been reading a Thomas Hardy a year-ish for the past couple of years, and he is probably one of my favorite Victorian authors, even though I haven't loved every single one of his books that he has written. But I really love his pastoral writing and like description and stuff. I really enjoy that. So I'm hopeful I will enjoy this one. I have read 4 Hardys so far, Far from the Madding Crowd, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, Jude the Obscure, and this past year I read The Mayor of Casterbridge. So out of those 2, I've loved 2, hated 1, and felt just kind of meh about the other. So I've kind of been all over the place with Thomas Hardy. So we'll see how Return of the Native is. I haven't really heard a whole lot of people talk about this, so it's not one of his super popular works. So we'll see how I feel. The last Victorian book on here, and this is probably not the last Victorian book that I will read because I have a couple of reading challenges, and so I may have some other Victorian books that end up on the docket this year, but the last one that I'm prioritizing on this list is The Warden by Anthony Trollope. This is a book that I have just recently picked up, so it was in my last book haul, but I have not read any Anthony Trollope at all. And he is a very well-known and loved Victorian author, and this is the first in his, I think it's Barsetshire. Yeah, in his Barsetshire Chronicles, which I think has 5 books in it. It's not a super big book, so these smaller books are making up for the really big books that are on this list because there's a few of them. But yeah, so I don't know if I'll like Anthony Trollope's writing style at all, but I want to give him a try. The next book on this list is a Gigantor tome, and it is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. I have read this book before. I would have called this book my all-time favorite book for a really long time. I did actually. Through like the end of high school. I think I read it in my sophomore year. So all through the rest of high school and through all of my young adulthood. But I kind of realized within the past few years, like, man, it's been a really long time since I've read this. So maybe I shouldn't call this my favorite anymore until I reread it and see how it stacks up against, you know, more recent favorites. So I plan to reread this year. This is a big book. I think it has like 1,200 pages or something. Funny story. So I just went to look and see how many pages are in this edition, which is the only edition of Count of Monte Cristo I've read, and this copy's abridged. This happened with Les Mis too, where I started reading it and realized it was abridged. So apparently I will probably have to replace this edition that has like, I think like 600 or 700 pages in it. About 600. So yeah, that's disappointing. I think there's going to be a buddy read of this going on next summer, actually. The same people who did the Les Mis read along, I think they are going to be doing The Count of Monte Cristo this summer. At least that's the rumor. We'll see. I'm really disappointed now because apparently I've only ever read the abridged version. I guess as a kid and a young adult, I didn't know to check for that. I feel like a fake fan now. Oh well, I'll remedy it this year. Next on this list is another reread, and this is cheating because this is technically 3 books, but we're calling it 1 book because we can, and I am, so there. That's Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is one of my all-time favorites. I used to read this trilogy annually. I think the first year I did, I was 12, and I continued to read it every year annually until I think the year that my daughter was born, and I turned 24 the year that she was born. So that was 12 years of reading this annually, and I haven't read it since. So I really want to reread this. I have read The Hobbit in recent days. By recent days, I mean a couple years ago, when I read it aloud to my daughter, and then we started The Fellowship of the Ring, but she was 6 at the time, and so Fellowship of the Ring was just a bit too much for her. It was just too much, you know. So we stopped reading it, and so I never went any farther in it, but I really want to reread this series. I think David Wiley is hosting a like slow read through of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where he's going to read it over the course of like, I want to say like 6 months or something. I am trying to decide whether or not I want to participate in that, because that makes it very doable, but I may not want to take it that slow when I get to it. So I'm going to be making a decision about that for sure pretty soon, but I am really excited to reread this. Speaking of rereads, I am slowly working my way through rereading Jane Austen's works. The only novel of hers that I had not previously read was Northanger Abbey, and I read that last year along with a reread of Sense and Sensibility. I could probably put 2 Jane Austens on here again, but I was looking for a little bit more variety and not the same author multiple times. So I decided to pick just one, and I picked Persuasion. I really love the color of this cover, but I don't remember anything about this at all. Like, I read Pride and Prejudice in 2005 when the movie with Keira Knightley came out. I saw the movie first and loved it, so then I read the book and loved it. And so then I went through and read all of Jane Austen's major novels except Northanger Abbey in a year, and this, I don't remember anything about Persuasion. I don't remember anything about Mansfield Park. I do remember Emma, Sense and Sensibility, and Pride and Prejudice, but I don't remember anything about this. So I'm looking forward to rereading this. It'll probably kind of be like reading it for the first time because it's been over 10 years since I read this, so it will be interesting to read it again. I may save this. I'll probably save this for Jane Austen July. Speaking of Jane Austen and Northanger Abbey, I want to read The Mysteries of Udolpho this year by Anne Radcliffe. Northanger Abbey, if you're not familiar with, is about a protagonist who is very much into Gothic novels, and she allows herself to imagine things and get carried away and get scared about things because she's filling her mind with Gothic novels so much. And this book is the one that's referenced the most in Northanger Abbey. So I actually found this at a library sale for 10 cents, and I was so thrilled because I really, really wanted to read this. So this is on my list for this year. I really don't know anything about it. I know there's like a scene that they talk about in Northanger Abbey all the time about like what's behind the curtain or something like that. So I'll be interested to get in that part, but I haven't even read the back. I don't even know what it's about. I just know that it's kind of like a sensation type novel. So I think it will be really fun to read this one this year. I probably should have mentioned this when I mentioned Tolstoy, but I am also planning on reading Demons by Fyodor Dostoevsky this year. I do not have a physical copy of this book yet, but I may or may not know that I'm getting it for Christmas. So I am planning to read that one. I have so many Dostoevskys on my shelf that I have not read yet. It's so sad, but I have read 3 of his major novels so far and really enjoyed all of them. Crime and Punishment is by far my favorite, but I've also read Brothers Karamazov and The Idiot and enjoyed all 3. So I'm looking forward to reading Demons, and I'm pretty sure the Codex Cantina is doing like some sort of read along or something with it this year, or at least like live shows and discussions and stuff. So that would be really fun to be able to jump into that. They have just such like thoughtful and thought-provoking conversations surrounding classics, and they dig so deep. And oh my gosh, their videos on Russian classics are just my favorite. Like the things to know before you read whatever book. All of those are so good, as well as when they do like actual like literary analysis and stuff. They just go so deep and I love it so much. So I'm really looking forward to reading that. I have pretty much been also reading a Dostoevsky every year. So last year was The Idiot. So I am slowly working my way through his works. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I did some polls recently for my classics where I just kind of like couldn't choose. So I basically made you guys help me choose. And one of those lineups was Fahrenheit 451 versus Lord of the Flies. Very different books, but they were just both on there. And at first, Lord of the Flies was winning, and then Fahrenheit 451 came back, and then it evened out to like something like 52 versus 48% or something like that. It was like almost evenly divided. So because this was the one that was ahead the most at the beginning, and this one is shorter, I am going with Lord of the Flies for this one. People seem to have very strong visceral reactions to this. Either they love it or they think it's the worst book ever in the world, and there doesn't seem to be much in between. I did the quick to judge tag earlier this year to try to choose a book to read that had been on my shelf for over a year. And this was one of the books that I chose, so I read the first paragraph and it almost made it. It was in like the top 3 of those books because I really liked the first paragraph a lot. So I'm looking forward to reading this one. This is a shorter one, and so that was another aspect of why I chose it, because I have a lot of beasts on here, so I figured I'd throw a smaller one on there. Plus, I have owned this book for several years and never picked it up. And I just got Fahrenheit 451 for my birthday this year. So that one I haven't had on my shelves as long, but I love dystopian books like Fahrenheit 451. So that's why it was so difficult to choose. But I also keep seeing Lord of the Flies being referenced like everywhere. A lot of people compare Red Rising to Lord of the Flies, and I read that this year. And so it's like, it's one of those books where it's like, I feel like I have to read it because then I can understand all the references. My last 2 books on here, were highly contentious, honestly. I actually put authors up. I said, would you choose Ellen Montgomery or would you choose Louisa May Alcott? And it was split very evenly. And I also got messages from several people who said, how am I supposed to choose? This is like choosing a favorite child. Like, oh my gosh, I can't choose a favorite. And I was like, I know, me either. That's why I put this up in the polls, and the polls were not helpful at all. Though I appreciate your input. But I decided this is why I decided to do 13 books. I was like, you know what? I'm going to include a book from each of them. So the first one I have on here is an Ellen Montgomery book, and this is an Ellen Montgomery book that I have owned for a really long time. I got it from Book Outlet, and it's just No, I didn't. I got it from Amazon. It was like a buy 3 for the price of 2 sale or something. Anyways, it has been sitting on my shelf for a really, really, really long time. This is a standalone, and I feel like Ellen Montgomery doesn't have a ton of standalones. Like she has the Anne series, the Emily series, the Pat series is like a duology, Story Girl is duology. So she doesn't have as many standalones, and this is one of them. And this is A Tangled Web. This has something to do with, I think like this vase is like a family inheritance or something like that. And then there's some quarreling over it. And that's really all I know about it. But I love Ellen Montgomery, so I'm certain that I will love it, but it's really interesting because I feel like this is the only series of hers, or book of hers, I should say, that doesn't have a child protagonist. I have not read all of her books, but I have read the Anne books, the Emily books, and the Story Girl, just dropped a book, duology. So it'll be interesting. This is about adults, so I'm sure I'll love it though. And then the last book on here is a Louisa May Alcott book. It was really difficult to choose a Louisa May Alcott book because I actually have a lot of them. I just read Little Women this month and really, really loved it. If you've been watching my vlogs, you know that. You've heard me rave and rave and rave about them. So it was difficult to choose because I have 8 cousins. I have An Old-Fashioned Girl, and then I have the rest of the series for Little Women. I have Little Men and Jo's Boys. So it was really difficult to choose. But I ended up deciding to go with Little Men. How cute is this copy, by the way? It's so pretty. I love it. The vintage copy. I have a version of Little Women in this as well, but it's abridged for some reason. So I have it because it's pretty, but yeah, this one's not abridged. So I decided I was gonna go with Little Men, which is a continuation of Jo's story. And these boys that I think it's at like the school that she has. So I'm looking forward to reading this. I have talked to a few of you who said that Little Men and Jo's Boys you actually liked better than Little Women. So that's exciting. I would like to also get to 8 cousins this year, but I don't know whether or not I will. We'll see. So, but this one is one that I really want to read. I want to continue the story of Little Women. Okay, I'm gonna try to lift this stack, but I think I'm gonna move the camera back first. Oh, if it's in the frame. There's some big books on here. Okay, so that is my list. I would love to hear from you in the comments down below what classics you are planning to read next year, and if you're planning to read any of these, because if you are and you'd like to buddy read any of them, I would love to. So just let me know if any of these are on your list as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.